Yep. Welcome, everyone, to the Historic Preservation Committee meeting at the City Council at City Hall in Boulder City, Wednesday, August 26, 7 p.m. Notice, pursuant to Section 3 of the Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, there will be no in-person attendance at this meeting. The public may view this meeting live at the following link, the City Council channel, and look under the City Council meeting live stream video. Okay, items listed on the agenda may be taken out of order. Two or more agenda items for consideration may be combined and any item on the agenda may be removed or related discussion may be delayed at any time. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. And for the first order of business is public comment. And to call in for public comment, please call 702-589-9629. This initial public comment will be limited to items on the agenda. And the number is 702-589-9629. Susie, was there any public comment mailed in, or emailed in, or something? No. Okay. We'll wait for public comment. 702-589-9629.
Historic preservation public comment.
Michael, this is Charlie Hans. I'd like to comment.
Welcome. Please go ahead.
Let me make sure I'm not getting any feedback. Hang on a minute. My name is Charlie Hans, Boulder City resident. I'd like to comment on agenda item number 4 and also on agenda item number 2. Let's see if I can't turn this thing.
Historic preservation public comment.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so am I on? Can I talk?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Charlie Hans, Boulder City resident. I'd like to comment on agenda item number 4 and also on agenda item number 2. First, agenda item number 4, which is an item to amend existing codes and programs to achieve historic preservation goals and comply with CLG and SOI standards. The need to strengthen the Boulder City Historic Preservation Code has become very clear in recent years as more and more historic structures have been altered or destroyed in the name of personal freedom to do whatever I want with my property. In spite of all the statutes and codes mandating preservation of historic features within the Boulder City Historic District, past city council and planning commissions have steadfastly ignored any real preservation efforts. The existing Preservation Code 11-27 is a watered-down document that pays lip service to preservation, but in fact allows property owners to do virtually anything they want to a property, without any regard for preserving the historic character of their property or their neighborhood. A mandatory preservation code is clearly necessary because it is obvious that misguided property owners will pay no attention to voluntary guidelines that, if followed, would preserve the unique historic character of Boulder City. Years of enacting codes that call for voluntary compliance to historic guidelines has resulted in the reclassification by Northwind of more than half of the buildings that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places as non-contributing to the historic character of the district. It is time to stiffen the requirements for maintaining and rehabilitating buildings within the Boulder City Historic District. Boulder City has recently been designated by SHPO as a certified local government. This designation places certain obligations on both the city and the Historic Preservation Committee. I hope that all the members of the committee will familiarize themselves with these obligations and wholeheartedly support the development of codes and guidelines that will actually prevent further degradation of buildings within the historic district. Now, a brief observation about agenda item number 2, the Northwind Report. I believe this present document is a draft, so I presume some changes may be made after it has been carefully reviewed. However, an important fact stands out when one looks at the classification of buildings within the historic district as either contributing or non-contributing to the historic character of the district or a neighborhood. Some buildings that had commonly been thought of as contributing to the historic character of a neighborhood have been classified by Northwind as non-contributing. And some buildings that appear to degrade a historic neighborhood have been classified as contributing. This is because Northwind has rightfully used the Secretary of Interior standards in assessing the historic quality of a building, and that highlights the fact that a pretty building is not necessarily historic, and a scruffy-looking building may in fact still maintain its important historic characteristics. We all need to recognize that fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, let's hang on for, see if there's any more public comment. Wait a minute. There's only one line that comes in, right?
Correct.
Okay. So the number is 702-589-9629. Okay, it's in the minute. Seeing that there's no other public comment at this time, let's move to the regular agenda. For possible action, approval of the minutes of the July 22nd, 2020 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of the July 22nd regular meeting.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, for possible action, presentation of and discussion on the update of the 1983 Janus Associates, Inc. survey of the Historic District with Courtney Mooney, Northwind Resource Consulting, LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief so I can turn it over to Northwind to do their presentation and answer committee member questions. We were in the staff report going to have Greta Ryle present the PowerPoint presentation, but unfortunately she's in a location that has cell service difficulty. So Courtney Mooney is going to do the presentation, and so I will get her on the phone right now, and then she can begin the presentation and then answer your questions.
Yep.
present the PowerPoint presentation, but unfortunately she's in a location that has
Hello, Courtney.
service difficulties.
Hello.
So Courtney Mooney is going to do the presentation.
Hold on, I should turn this.
Yes, so we're getting the feedback.
Oh, the delay.
Yes, sorry about that.
No,
Okay.
Well, I have you on the speaker for the presentation before the committee. And I think like the last time, I can advance the slides for you on your behalf. So just let me know when you want to move to the next slides. And I don't know if you had a overall introduction you wanted to start with. But thank you for coming to the committee tonight.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. We're excited to present this, the final, or the almost final draft. So the first slide, which is the aerial image of Boulder City, should just be, that's the slide we should be on. In March of this year, Northwind conducted a historic resource survey of the Boulder City Historic District. And the purpose of the survey was to provide the city with updated information in order to determine whether the district continues to meet the integrity criteria for listing in the National Register, and also possibly provide some recommendations for further study. Boulder City's historic buildings were first documented by Janus Associates Inc. in 1982, and the following year, the Boulder City Historic District was listed in the National Register at the national level under Criterion A for the association with the Boulder Canyon Project and as the first fully developed experiment in new town planning as promoted by the community planning movement, and under Criterion C for its significant architecture. Okay, next slide, please. So Northwind started the project by conducting historic research. We started with online research at local libraries to view historic images, maps, aerials, newspapers, and city directories. We were looking for information on historic patterns of land use, the commercial and residential development of Boulder City, as well as architects, builders, and developers that were responsible for the design and construction of the properties in the district. And once the COVID restrictions were lifted for museums, we were able to conduct in-person historic research at the Boulder City Hoover Dam Museum. And we also were lucky to have some personal interviews. We were treated to 2 historic tours by historian Dennis McBride and HBC Chair Goya, and we discussed the importance of historic landscape elements with HBC Commissioner Davenport. Next slide, please. So when conducting the survey, Northwind followed National Register and the Nevada State Historic Preservation Guidelines in conducting the survey, and all buildings within the historic district boundaries were photographed regardless of age, and notes were taken in the field regarding the address, exterior building materials, number of stories, architectural style, and current use. And buildings that were not assigned a group letter designation in the 1983 Janus report were assigned one, and they were enclosed in parentheses to signify those that were assigned by Northwind. Next slide, please. So the survey results were a little bit different than the 1983 survey. We documented 518 properties, and that included 9 maintenance and operational buildings and structures, 12 institutional, public, and semi-public buildings, 50 commercial buildings, and 447 residential properties. 78 properties were constructed outside of the established period of significance of 1931 and 1945. 225 properties are recommended as contributing resources to the district, which includes 64 individually eligible properties. 293 properties were recommended as non-contributing, and these are properties that were made up of buildings that have either suffered the loss of architectural integrity due to incompatible and irreversible alterations, or there was new construction, and that could include modern infill that replaced demolished historic properties. So it's important to note that these findings will not, in and of themselves, initiate changes in the National Register listing status of the current district, However, should the city or another entity wish to pursue an amendment to the current nomination, the district, with its current boundaries, would no longer meet the eligibility criteria because it requires a majority of contributing properties. Next slide. So we thought maybe some visuals would help to kind of look at some of the relationships between the building types and contributing status and the changes that have occurred since 1983 survey. So the first pie chart on the top left shows the relationship of historic properties to those constructed after the 1983 Janus survey. And those properties, which are shown in the dark bluish purple, those were the properties that changed from contributing to non-contributing. And again, that was for those reasons that I mentioned earlier. The pie chart in the center shows the relationship of all the building types surveyed, and the pie chart on the right top right shows the relationship of the contributing and non-contributing and individual eligible properties these were our findings as a result of our survey. Next slide, please. So subsequent to the survey, records on file with the Clark County Assessor's Office were consulted to obtain construction dates, building sketches, and data regarding additions and modifications. Photographs that were taken by Janus Associates were also reviewed to determine what, if any, alterations had been made to the building since the district's listing. And this was really important because individual building descriptions were not provided in the 1983 nomination. Rather, the architectural integrity of the buildings were assigned to one of three categories, and that was original, retrievable, and irretrievable. And it was assumed that buildings marked as retrievable had been subject to minor alterations, including some that may be identified today as being reversible. And irretrievable buildings were those that had undergone intensive alterations, which affected their ability to convey their historic significance. In some cases, photographs were not taken of the buildings in 1983, or the main facades were obscured by vegetation, making comparison difficult. So due to these occasional discrepancies, we would conduct occasional field checks to verify that all the properties listed in the National Register nomination were accounted for. A final challenge was a result of how National Register nominations are prepared today versus in 1983. And one of the most kind of visible things that the commissioners have seen is that the current individual resource forms require a lot more information as compared to the half-page cards that were produced in the 80s. Next slide, please. So the district was, again, evaluated to determine if it retained integrity and retained the criteria that would allow it to be a district. And so in order for a district to be registered with the National Register, it has to have at least 51% contributing properties within the boundaries of the district. And the individual buildings, they would have to be constructed within the period of significance, which was 1931 to 1945. They would have to possess one or more criteria of significance, which would be criteria A, B, or C. And they would have to retain sufficient historic integrity to convey the significance in order to be considered contributors. So that basically means up to 2 modifications to materials or design that would be in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior standards, and that would be considered acceptable. Next slide, please. So in order for a building to be considered individually eligible with the National Register, it would, again, have to be constructed within the period of significance, 1931 to 1945. It would have to possess one or more of the National Register criteria of significance, A, B, and or C, and it must retain aspects of integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. Next slide, please. And so with the results, Northwind carefully reviewed several options that would possibly help the district regain some of the integrity or some of the contributing status in order to meet the criteria for a district. We reviewed the expansion of the period of significance to include properties constructed between 1946 and 1970, which would be the 50-year cutoff, and found that this would not make a considerable contribution of contributing properties. And additionally, as a group, no significant historical association could be attributed to these later properties that would warrant expanding the period of significance. And Northwind reviewed the potential for amending the nomination to include designed landscapes and associated features, and has determined that these features would also not be in a sufficient number to create a majority of contributing properties. So for these reasons, Northwind does not recommend updating the existing district nomination. However, there are some things that can be done that would help with the overall integrity and feeling and association of the district. One of those things, as your caller mentioned, is develop regulatory design guidelines. Northwind recommends the development of tiered design guidelines for any property, regardless of contributing status, that would be located within the district and constructed within the established period of significance. The guidelines should be enforceable and housed in the city's zoning ordinance, and they should apply to any work on the exterior of the property requiring a building permit, and should be appropriate to the contributing status of the building. So for example, contributing and individually eligible properties should have stricter standards than non-contributing properties. And applications for such work should be reviewed by the HBC with support from the Community Development Department for compatibility to the established design guidelines. It's also recommended that designation of individual resources and districts on the Boulder City Historic Register, which is also referred to as local designation, be explored. In addition to the properties that Northwind recommended as individually eligible, we found that the Los Angeles Bureau of Power and Light and 6 companies' single-family and duplex housing constructed in the 30s and located primarily along Birch, Cherry, and Ash Streets between Railroad Avenue and Nevada Way are worthy of exploration as a locally designated historic district. The majority of these homes are recommended as individually eligible and contributing properties. There were no other noteworthy clusters of contributing or individually eligible properties. However, it's entirely possible, and I think it's a great idea to explore local designation of individually contributing properties as historically rather than architecturally significant for their association with an important aspect of Boulder City's history. Also, Northwind recommends that an education and outreach program for property owners and residents should be developed in tandem with the adoption, oversight, and enforcement of design guidelines, as well as local designation of individual buildings and districts. And these programs would include a discussion of significant architectural features by property type, the responsibilities of property owners, resources for property owners, including technical assistance from the city, HBC, or Nevada SHPO, and potential funding sources, and the city's historic preservation awards and other economic and community-based historic preservation benefits. Because these incentive programs would help property owners with the sensitive rehabilitation of their historic homes. And this has shown to promote reinvestment in neighborhoods, and it allows residents to contribute to the preservation of the district while being acknowledged for their efforts. Incentives such as matching grants for certified exterior rehab work can be overseen by the HBC to ensure compliance with the city's design guidelines. And work can include critical building maintenance, structural stabilization work, repair and restoration of historic features, even reconstruction of missing historic details or in-kind replacement of deteriorated historic elements. It's important that applicants should be provided historical information about their building, property type, and the district, specific guidelines relating to the character-defining features of their property type, and again, additional resources for them to get technical information or assistance. And, these types of things can all be customized based on the community and the commission and the types of resources that are within the district. Northwind recommends an updated survey determination of eligibility and potential National Register nomination of the Boulder City Water Supply System, documented in the Boulder City Water Supply System Determination of Eligibility Report, which was prepared in 1991. And that report contains the water, in addition to all of the other resources that are in that report, it also contains the water treatment filtration plant and the original water tank that are currently located within the Boulder City Historic District. And Northwind has determined that both of these structures are individually eligible for listing in the National Register under criteria A and C. So a new survey of that water supply system is highly recommended. And then finally, Northwind recommends a historic survey and a preservation treatment plan for historic landscape features, recognizing that the original 1983 Boulder City Historic District National Register nomination had limitations in that it focused only on buildings and structures and did not include sites and objects. Northwind recommends evaluation of these potentially significant resources located within the district. Specifically, a survey of design landscapes, such as the large landscape civic areas, buffer areas, greenbelt, and even the street layout as included in the DeBoer plan, because all of these were mentioned as being highly progressive for the time and are part of the significance of the district. A comprehensive survey of any remaining urban and landscape elements and associated features in the district would provide the city with a valuable management tool for preserving these features. And then finally, next slide, please. Northwind has some recommendations for further areas within the city to be studied for historic significance. And these are just areas that are directly associated with the district's period of significance that were not included in the original district. They're not intended as recommendations to expand the existing districts. They could be separate districts on their own, depending on what other additional information possibly could be uncovered with further study. So we're just providing this slide to show that these areas are connected to the district's period of significance. And the following slides are, as in the first presentation, the following slides are examples of individually eligible, contributing and non-contributing residential properties by most group designations. So these will not be reviewed in total, but I'm happy to take any questions you may have regarding specific properties. And that includes our presentation.
Well, thank you, Courtney. This is Alan Goya, Chairman. Nice to hear your voice again. Anyway,
thank you.
I'd like to first, mention, just congratulate the committees. It's been one of our goals, CLG, but this inventory is kind of like, we're now at day one. It's like, so we can start from, it's just like from day one we have, everything is sitting before us, what we have and what we don't have. And I think it's pretty exciting, and I think it's a really, thank the committee for making this happen, and staff, and Courtney. But this is important for us because since 1983, it just seems like old time, a long time ago. This is what we based everything on. Now we have a new standard and a new day one to start with. So congratulations to everybody, because it's a major part of what we have to do. I had some questions about the tiered regulation suggestion that you had, Courtney. Specifically, how would that work? I mean, I'm seeing that you're talking about something that buildings that are non-contributing would be at a different kind of priority than buildings that are non-contributing. It seems to me that what's being suggested is that we should really be focusing on our contributing assets at this point. Is that, and try to keep those things going, but how would that tier, can you explain kind of that tiered ordinance to us?
Sure. Well, in my experience, how that has worked is, so if you have a contributing property, you're going to have a stricter, your requirements will be stricter in terms of the types of exterior work that you could do on the property. So it might be that the work must be compatible with the specific property and the group type in your case specifically, and also within the district. If you are a non-contributing property, it might be that you really only have to be compatible with the district, and certain things, you would have a little bit lower threshold of requirements. That is in order, that is kind of so that folks don't, maybe they don't feel as though they have to, in order to do exterior work, that they have to recreate or reconstruct historic elements that are no longer there. But it also, in an extreme case, let's say, might keep them from constructing like a dome type of roof on their house or something that's completely not compatible with the district.
I see. Are there any?
And again, this is customizable. This is whatever, you know, the HVC and the city and the residents. It's a public process.
Mm-hmm. Yes. How important is like landowner buy-in on these things? I mean, right now, the district, let's say, if you look at a deed, if you're in the historic district, there's nothing in your deed that mentions that you're in a historic district right now. Is there, I mean, how are these things enforceable, I guess? Do we need a landowner buy-in on, you know, one of the suggestions you have, for example, is to go after historically significant property and call them, you know, landmarks, let's say, give them landmark status or something. Would that give them extra protection? And if we could offer them extra protection, would it require property owner buy-in in order to make that happen?
Well, typically with locally designated properties, it is like if it's a group of properties, it's an overlay zoning, or even with individual properties, it would be an additional layer of review. So with other cities, you would have to go through the public process to rezone a group of properties as locally designated historic properties. The benefit to the property owner is, again, yes, there's an extra layer of protection. In more, I would say with my history with the city of Las Vegas, a big benefit to a lot of neighborhoods is that it's an extra layer of protection against commercial encroachment. I don't know that that's as big an issue in Boulder City, but specific neighborhoods in Las Vegas were, you know, butting up right next to casino properties and that we're hoping to expand, you know, so historic designation looked really good to them, you know. But yes, it would have to be a public process where these properties would with districts, you would require a majority of property owner consent, and with individual properties, just property owner consent.
Okay. One of the things that you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation was that you're suggesting not changing the application for the historic district, or not changing the parameters. I'm not saying that quite right. Updating the it's not the ordinance, but the national, yes,
right.
as it would kind of upset the apple cart. And it's my understanding is like you have to, when you start the district, you have to have 50% contributing factors. But once you establish the district, that's no longer the major criteria for districts. So we are not in danger of losing our designation if we leave well enough alone, is what you're saying?
Yes, we're recommending that the current nomination be left as is.
And at the same time, in your recommendations, you mentioned, can you put up that one slide again on the recommendation? Michael.
I'll let you go.
Correct. It's almost like the last slide. Was that it? Was that before that? One before. Update the 1991 survey of a Boulder City water supply system. For example, let's say the water supply. Isn't that what you're suggesting? Is updating it's a different survey. It will be a whole different survey then.
Correct.
Okay, so this would not affect the whole the original application. Just kind of adding to it. Is that what you're saying?
It wouldn't add it. It would be a separate nomination if it's found eligible. We're just recommending that that it be looked at for updating because it's been a really long time. 1991.
Okay.
Hey, Courtney, this is Blair. Thank you for your presentation and all your hard work.
Thank you.
Lots of great details and information. A couple comments, and this may be also for Michael, though, and that is, how would you like comments presented or given or conveyed to who and when? And this is for the report as well as the forms.
That might be a question for Michael.
Well,
I'll jump in if you need me to.
well, maybe Courtney, if you could talk a little bit about the next steps in the process and submission to SHPO and the time frame for that. I think that will be helpful to frame that for the committee's understanding.
Sure. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the commission has 30 days to review the report, correct? Michael?
I'm sorry, you said what?
That the commission has 30 days to review the report?
Correct.
Okay. And then, hold on, I need to get the timeline up.
When you said are you talking about the committee?
SHPO then has 30 days to review and provide comments. So I apologize, I don't have the timeline up in front of me. I believe there should be some time in there for us to make some corrections before it goes to SHPO.
Courtney, I have the updated timeline in front of me. It talked about the presentation this evening and revisions to the revised draft based on Historic Preservation Committee comments. Tentatively, we were looking at September 11th with submission to SHPO by October 26th.
Okay, good. Right.
So I guess, Courtney, let me ask this question. Since that's the deadline for SHPO, October 26th, and giving you enough time to incorporate any comments from the committee, what would be the deadline that Northwind would need for those comments from the committee?
So, hold on just 1 second. Okay. Revisions to the revised draft. So, that doesn't give the HPC a lot of time to review it. It's not 30 days. How much time would the commission need? I'm thinking we would need no more than a week, and that includes over a weekend.
I'm sorry, were you suggesting that Northwind only needs a week, including weekends, to incorporate our comments? Or were you suggesting the committee has a week?
That we would need at least a week to incorporate our comments. So if the deadline to submit to SHPO is September 11th, then I'm just going to count backwards. If we could possibly get those comments from the commission by the 4th, that would be great.
Of what?
So Courtney, I know that there is a draft that goes to SHPO, and I guess the question is, would there be additional time for the committee to provide comments before the final submission?
Yes, I would think so, because if it's due to SHPO on September 11th, and this is up to you and the commission. If the commission wants to withhold comments so that they have more time, I feel like SHPO would probably want to see their comments. We can certainly address SHPO's comments and the commission's comments at once, if that helps kind of condense the timeline.
For example, I haven't gone through obviously every piece of property here, but I did notice one on, let's say, for example, I'm still kind of confused about what is a determining factor for individual designation. For example, one of the strategies I think is to look at having individual designation for significant properties. For example, a Grace Community, it is Grace Community Church, which was deemed to be a contributing to the historic preservation, but it was said that it did not meet the criteria for individual nomination. And being the first church in Boulder City, I would think that would be somewhat of a milestone. So could you maybe explain the criteria, just in our mind, what makes something eligible for individual nomination and not?
Grace Church had a really large addition constructed onto it. So even though that addition was constructed in the 40s, it like tripled the size of the church. And it also had another addition, a more modern addition, constructed onto it. So it just didn't meet the criteria for individual eligibility.
Oh, because of it still contributed to, was a contributing feature, but because it had been expanded so much, it lost its individual eligibility. That's
Correct.
The reason. Okay, thank you.
So Courtney, I'm sorry, going back to the schedule, and maybe this can be figured out between you and Michael, but 30 days is from the date that we received the report was the 21st of August, and 30 days is September 18th. So I guess I'm just wondering, do we need 30 days or 15 days? I would prefer 30 days, but that's just me.
Well, I would think to give the public a chance, let's say, and you justified, I know that the reasons for Grace Community is now, but let's say if somebody was looking at their piece of property and just look, which is for public view right now, and said, I have other information that could make this, let's say, individually eligible because I have this story or something like that, they could question some of the determinations if they needed to.
So are you suggesting that we as a committee should take that 30 days to go and seek public comment and incorporate those in our comments by the 18th, and that's fine?
Well, to me, it's like almost, I'd like to have a chance just to kind of review all the, as many as possible, contributing properties, and to say, okay, why is this? I would think that in the long run, let's say if I was a property owner, and if we want people to value their historic properties, and I think that's the goal here, is that people have an appreciation for what they have. I think that people could be at least motivated to look at their properties and argue hey, I think this is an incorrect interpretation, or add to it, or at least have some kind of chance to, look at their individual properties and make a comment on it. That's what I'm thinking.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to mention a few things that I found in going over this report. Is my mic on? Can you hear me?
Right there.
Okay, there I go. Okay, I think that there's a lot of ambiguity about what makes a house compliant or non-compliant, and I'd like to reference one particular house here that I see on page 91. It's 1336 Colorado Avenue. As it appeared in 1960, it was a white box, basically. As it appears today, it is the same house, but it has an overhang on the porch and a carport. Those are the only changes made to that home, and there has been a lot of effort put into making that home beautiful. It is still the tiny little home it was back in 1931 inside, but I don't see why it is now non-compliant. I don't understand that. It's on page 91. The original photo is on 90 from 1960.
I am looking it up right now. So this building has undergone modifications. It's had 3 additions. It has the enclosure of the original screen porch. We're talking about, this is 1336 Colorado, right?
Yes, it's
Okay.
59 at the bottom of the page, 91 at the top of the page.
Okay, so it's had alterations to the front porch, and so it had too many modifications to be considered contributing.
Okay, now let's go to my property, which is 1360 Denver Street. There are a couple, 1360 Denver.
Actually, you can look at the previous page on 59 or 89 is Lynn's property.
Yeah, previous page, right. Okay, I'm really curious, number one, where the photo came from 1960. I've never seen that photo.
Hold on just one second. I'm looking at the individual form.
And also, it's referred to as Denver Avenue, which is incorrect. It is Denver Street. And in the report, there's several places where it is referred to as Denver Avenue.
Okay, we will fix that. So what page number are you on?
The top is 89, at the bottom is 57.
Yeah, and I think.
Okay, so
Courtney, sorry, Courtney, this is Michael Mays. I think for your reference, you probably don't have the entire packet in front of you. You have your report. It would be the page number at the bottom, which is page 57.
Sorry about that. We're all loving working from home. Okay, I'm getting there, almost. Okay. So this apparently came from the Janus report, this historic photograph.
I didn't see it in the Janus report. I saw the one that was taken in 1982, which shows at that time that the screened-in porch had been remodeled. This was before I bought it in 92. This was in 1982. It had been modified and a bathroom added and the screened-in porch added to the bedroom. I much prefer the picture in 1960 because the landscaping was beautiful. So I think that even though it was considered repairable or whatever in 1982, I don't know how it could have been if the bedroom had been enclosed and there had been a bathroom added, and also a garage was added onto the building as well.
Correct. We found a few of those, and this is one of the challenges that we faced, is that the standards in 1983 were different than they are now. So we found a few of them that they had considered contributing that today would not be considered contributing.
Right, because windows were closed off, garage was added. Anyway, this is a discrepancy. As a homeowner and knowing when my house was built, on the graph that you have where you list the homes on Denver Street are all listed as being built in 1932, and that's incorrect. There were 6 original homes built in 1931, October 1931, and my house and 5 other properties are among those. The other homes on Denver were added the following year, which would have been 1932.
Okay. The construction dates that are on the Excel spreadsheet came from the Clark County assessors.
Well, they're kind of incorrect because the paperwork that I got with the house and the picture at the museum shows my house and it has a date on it of October 1931. And the Janus report also has it listed as 1931.
Yeah, that's another challenge for sure.
Just, I'm making a note of that because, like you said, when a person buys a home in a historical area, they would like to know when the house was built.
Right.
Thank you.
So it sort of sounds like we want 30 days to get back to the original question. It sounds like there's a lot of comments and corrections that I think we on the committee want to make, but also perhaps we want to reach out to homeowners and property owners to maybe get some, I guess, clear up some of maybe some problems or wrong dates or those kinds of details.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see a problem with 30 days. I think that SHPO is going to want to hear that input from the community. And from the committee. I'm wondering, Courtney, if the best way to handle this, and maybe you and I can touch base with SHPO, is you have the deadline of submission on the 11th, but we provide a concurrent commentary from the committee regarding comments on the plan that they could review concurrently. And then with that information, SHPO can then give you guidance back on their comments and changes. Does that seem reasonable based on your prior interactions with SHPO?
So just to make sure I understand, you're saying that we would submit the draft on the 11th, and then the commission would submit their comments concurrently with SHPO?
Correct.
So the only issue with that I foresee, and SHPO may completely be okay with it, is typically they want to have all the comments from the commission before they review it. But I think that's a conversation that you should have with SHPO to find out what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, we can have that conversation, commit to the 30 days subject to SHPO's approval, and give them the two choices, either concurrent submissions or that they would back off the initial deadline of September 11th so that it allows Northwind enough time to incorporate comments and then submit.
Correct.
I'd be happy with that.
That sounds great. So, so I did have a few comments, and that's why I was wondering if I should just blurt out all these comments tonight, or, I mean, I would prefer to write them down and make them available. Because some of them are editorial, such as, is it Denver Street or Denver Avenue or Denver Road, you know, those kinds of, you know, minor edits as well. But my main comment has to do with your section on eligibility recommendations, which is your page 51. And I just want to highlight one of the things that you say here is in the second paragraph, quote, evaluations of integrity for historic districts should examine the integrity of not only the building that comprise the district, but also the integrity of the setting, which includes landscapes and streetscapes, such as sidewalks and rhythm of setbacks, and in terms of the National Register's 7 aspects. And so based on that, as well as one of your recommendations that you already mentioned, which was to do another review or conduct a survey and prepare preservation treatment for landscape features. So given those two things that you have in your report, when you go to page 133 and 134, which is summary and recommendations, I'm a bit concerned with the quotation or the second paragraph of that, which starts with, it is important to note that these findings will not in and of themselves initiate changes in the National Register listing status. And then you say, however, should the city or another entity wish to pursue an amendment to the current nomination, the district with its current boundaries would no longer meet the eligibility criteria, which requires a majority of contributing properties. My point is that I guess I would suggest that you change that to perhaps, quote, however, should the city or another entity wish to pursue an amendment to the current nomination, other historic component resources within the district would need to be inventoried and evaluated in order to determine if the district meets National Register eligibility criteria. And the reason I say that is because although your report is awesome and excellent in identifying and evaluating or inventorying and evaluating buildings, and that's against architectural, within the architectural context, it doesn't address other components that you, of course, say that, you know, historic districts are not just made up of buildings, basically. There are other historic components that are not addressed in your report. I know I think you suggest a little bit here and there that more work needs to be done, but I don't think you can state or should state that the historic district does not have integrity based on this new information you've provided, because there's still information that I think is missing and needs to be included. So one of my comments was, even though buildings are usually primary contributing features within a historic district, and the updated inventory and evaluation identifies a lack of majority of contributing buildings, the report should further justify why the historic district no longer meets National Register eligibility criteria, or why the historic district nomination should not be updated. So for instance, your buildings or your inventory of the buildings, those have been identified as far as their integrity. However, the historic district as a whole has not been. And I just wonder if there's a possibility of, I guess, either elaborating on which features, I mean, you kind of generalize that you reviewed the period of significance as well as landscapes, but there's like no listing or identification or justification for how you came to that conclusion. And I'm just wondering if, and I had a conversation with, sorry, I can't remember her name, it's SHPO, Kristen, right, about this a little bit, and was wondering, how do you justify, or how do you document the integrity of the historic district as a whole when it's made up of all these components? And one of her suggestions was either you write a report that, identifies those other features and compares them to the Severin criteria, or another suggestion she had was to fill out kind of a version of their historic district form, which does kind of list those things that you would look at in determining the eligibility of the historic district, which includes the 7 aspects of integrity. Sorry, that's a super complicated question or comment.
I was trying to ask the same question too, but basically.
Well, I guess the easy answer would be that we were asked to look at the updating the current nomination. So we were not asked to look at landscape features. And that is why we recommended looking at them in the future.
So, but can you, is it accurate to say that the city, if the city wishes to pursue an amendment to the current nomination within the district within its current boundaries would no longer meet the eligibility criteria? And that's only because of one component of the historic district that it was evaluated, and that was the buildings. It doesn't include, I mean, it's not just the buildings that should be considered, it's the other contributing features.
What I think she was trying to say is that even with those contributing to the landscape, the land plan, it wouldn't add enough points or whatever criteria to change the designation.
She does summarize that, but I don't see the data to show that. Right. And I guess I guess I would like to see how did you come to those conclusions? Those last two, I guess. Well, no, they're actually within the same paragraph. I just put them out, split them out. So is there a way to add, I guess, data to confirm your review that the period of significance should or shouldn't be expanded? And as well as there's no data to support why design landscapes and associated features are either insufficient or non-contributing.
I think maybe you're talking about two different things. The expansion of the period of significance we did not recommend because we could not find a significant association with what makes the district significant with those buildings that were constructed after the period of significance. In terms of the data for the landscape features, we did not do a survey of the landscape features, so we don't have any data for that. This was based on observations in the field, which is why we recommended future study.
So it's more.
And I think the easiest solution would just be to change the statement as you recommended.
Okay. Thank you, because it's based on your observation. It's not based on data where your recommendation is made. So that would work perfectly. Thanks.
Sure.
there more comments from the committee?
Well, it seems to me.
I think
It seems to me that we should go with some of their recommendations for the future, like in the next year, we should take some of these recommendations and decide where we're going to go next. Like with the public.
Well, may I ask a question of staff? Where does staff feel like the next steps based upon this report?
Well, concurrently, we are working with the Nevada Preservation Foundation on a historic preservation plan, and they have been provided this report, which includes those recommendations, so they can incorporate that information in their continued outreach with the community to develop recommendations and action items that would be incorporated in that plan for the committee's consideration and the city council's consideration.
Okay. Is there a timeline on that, Michael? Like, they'll get back to us, or?
I'm going to be updating you on that in a next agenda item, or not the next one, but a future agenda item this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any more further comments or questions from the committee?
I'd like to comment on landscape
Aspects. I really think that should in the future be a part of our goal with this committee. I realize how difficult it is going to be in this town, but one thing that stood out to me when I was at George Washington's mother's home back in Virginia was that the boxwood hedge that she planted back in the 1700s was still in existence and still thriving. And if only we could encourage people in this town to keep their trees watered and keep them alive and to have respect for their property, in some way that we can encourage people to do that, it would be wonderful. I think it would really add to the element of this historical nature that we're talking about. Thank you.
At one time, maybe Susan, you can confirm this, maybe not, but I was talking to our ex-mayor, Eric Lundgaard, and he was saying that one time during the, along the tree streets, that the residents were given a subsidy on water. For example, to keep the water, to keep the grass in their yards. Do you recall if that was something?
No.
No.
It may have been discussed at one point by the city council, but to my knowledge, nothing was implemented about that, but we definitely would have to research records from back in the 90s when he was on council, but
right.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. I think that there's lots of aspects of this that could be considered. Any other comments? Okay, well, thank you very much, Courtney. Lots to digest, actually. A tremendous amount, and just great reading. I know I've been up just looking at some surprising results and some, very interesting things, and thank you very much.
Thank you. We really appreciate all your really, really thoughtful comments. We can tell you guys are really excited about this and, read it, and we're just really grateful for all of your feedback. This is going to end up to be a really good report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, let's see.
So just this, can I clarify? I'm going to just give you digital comments, send them to you. Is that okay?
Yes, why don't we have the committee just email to me separately, obviously, any of your comments. I will compile them all together and share them with Northwind. And concurrently, I will have a conversation with SHPO on their preference of how they want to receive the information, either with the incorporated changes, which means a delay in which it's submitted to them, or concurrently with Northwind's submission.
Do you want tracked changes or do you want a comment sheet that ties to?
I'm sure Courtney would prefer, well, except it's a PDF. So your track changes, if you have that ability, you'd have to have a certain kind of Adobe. So I think if you can just, page and paragraph references on comments, and then just provide that, and I'll just put it all together so she's not having to review 5 separate comments. It's all organized, corresponding to the pages in the report.
A comment matrix.
Yes.
Yes, and to make it easier for Courtney, use her page numbers on the report.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to agenda item number 3 for possible action. Discussion regarding the Historic Preservation Award for 2020 and activities for Historic Preservation Day 2020. Well, I have a comment. So last week there was a city council meeting, and the mayor specifically called me out on what our activities were, although that the motion on hand was a unanimous action by the entire committee. But based upon what the mayor said and how the city council voted that evening, I have stopped doing anything on Historic Preservation Day. I just are really kind of looking at the committee for direction or support, or what do you guys want to do? Because obviously the mayor has singled me out and has no confidence in that decision. So what do you guys want to do?
Well, Alan, I said it was an excellent idea of yours, and I am behind it 100%, and I'm excited about being involved in it. I think it's going to be great. So, of course, I was very disappointed to hear the mayor say those things. But as far as I know, the whole committee is behind you on this, and it's very exciting. I think it's going to be great. So I wouldn't let it get you down too much, and just know that I, for one, I'm right there with you.
Appreciate it.
I am too, Alan. Just let me know what you want me to do.
Ditto.
Well, I appreciate the support of the committee, but it's always been my goal and my understanding that what the function of this committee is not so much advocation, but is to supply information and help the city council in making decisions. Now we still have that that vote of the city council saying that they want one award, which is no big issue, but how do we structure this? And the idea of having actually 2 awards was to be more of an educational process, as we talked about the last meeting. One of the things that staff has done for us, if you look at the nominations, they've included in that paperwork the half-page report from Northwind. So it actually lists what are the contributing features of all of those properties and which ones are contributing, which ones are non-contributing, and which makes for very interesting reading. And this is one of the goals, was to enlighten the community. So it's really the purpose of the Secretary of the Interior standards is that we're all talking the same language, basically. And so when we talk historic preservation or restoration, we have a common language. And I think it's important that especially if we move forward with whatever ordinances, changes, that we speak that language, that common language. And that's
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would just like to note, I don't know if I included it elsewhere in the packet, but I should have included the SOI standards with this item. So I did print out several copies of the
Right.
one-page list, so I can pass those out so you've got those in front of you.
Okay. I don't know if how many of you attended the, had a chance to attend the conference, the Tacoma conference
Not yet,
last week,
Yeah.
which is,
not yet.
it was an excellent conference. I mean, on lots of information. And I think one of the most interesting sessions was a discussion of the Secretary of Interior standards. It was kind of like, what's interesting were these two experts taking opposing views, but using the same Secretary of Interior standards. And, it's really a perspective, and it really emphasizes that, it's really community standards ultimately that make these things work or not work, I guess. It's, what is acceptable to community. And I think that is the, educationally wise, is something we have to get out to the community so that we're all at least talking the same language here. So that, as a community, we can come together and get some kind of consensus about how we can move forward. Talking to the mayors of, during the time of the first ordinance is that, Roger Tobler, Eric Lundgaard, they specifically told me the reason that the first ordinance didn't pass, because they didn't pay attention to it, that it was kind of there was not enough public input on the first ordinance, and that's why it failed, is that no one really paid attention. Everybody felt historic preservation, we're all for it. What's not to like about it, until the ordinance passed and everybody decided, what do you mean I can't do this or I can't do this? And because the public did not have buy-in or understanding of what the goals were, I feel like that ordinance failed. And I certainly don't want the city to go through that trauma again. I don't think we can force things on people, but we have to be able to communicate, And in the time of COVID and public meetings like this is even going to be a tougher way to, it's a tougher challenge. I did some, I appreciate your, one of the things that I was looking at, some of the numbers here, the mayor had suggested that I was trying to program a Facebook Live show, which I have a Facebook Live podcast. But I was just trying to look at the numbers there. I just looked at the city council page on YouTube, and there were 5 views for Tuesday's meeting so far, and I'm sure there's more during the live stream. But I just did a piece on Terra Bortoli, and this is up to 3,000 views right now, and it's mostly locals that are looking at this thing, and I thought, well, the mayor actually had a great idea. We can deliver 3,000 views into a program like this would be fantastic. But, I just don't know where to, this kind of effort is going to take a lot of work. And without the support of the council, I'm not sure if it's.
So my interpretation of what the mayor, or what I came away with, was we only have to do one award, and I'm fine with that. And then the actual Historic Preservation Day event, I think we should just continue what the plan is. So I think we all just agree that we're all on board with doing the Historic Preservation Day event, and it should go on as planned. I don't think he conveyed any restrictions on our plans. The only restriction he conveyed was for the Historic Preservation Award. So instead of 2, it's just 1. And I think, so we have 1 award, but we can still, within Historic Preservation Day events, we can acknowledge that we received, 6 other, I can't remember, other nominations, and we can, talk about that during perhaps the Facebook Live event. I don't know. What do you
Would you still do it the whole month? Like,
Well, kind of the idea is, what we're discovering. I don't know if I've done 2 shows kind of lately that really specifically get tours of buildings. I did the LADWP, and I did the company store, just to see how this. And one of the things that it enabled us to do was people could participate live and actually be in the tour without having to go on the tour and ask questions as we toured a building.
But I think that's what you suggested before, and we agree with that.
Right.
So has anything changed since then?
Well, there's also, I think that ultimately our goal was my goal was to present the Northwind report. Kind of like, this is where we're at as a presentation, some kind of public meeting or kind of a Zoom, maybe in here it can be the highlight of the show. It's proved a little bit tougher as far as getting support, it's kind of getting down to Michael and I doing this. I know Lisa LaPlante is kind of, has a lot on her plate right now. And, my feeling is like, this is going to take a lot of effort and work. And unless we have support of the council, I
want to say something. So we don't need the support of anybody outside of who's here now. We don't rely on the council for any of our other previous Preservation Day events. And this one is even less. We don't even have to do a whole lot. So I think, we should get that straight. We don't need the council for this. I don't understand why you're even bringing that up, because it's not an issue. We can only give out 1 award this year, and we are free to proceed as always with the Historic Preservation Day event. That those are our decisions to make. Nobody's interfered with that, so I don't think you need to worry about that. And you have our support. I've helped put on a lot of events in town, so I'm happy to be involved with this, and I have some ideas myself. So one of my concerns is, so I think we talked about making this a Historic Preservation Month thing, and we would have different segments. So we're going to do the award live, and then have some other segments that are filmed in advance, or maybe posted to the city's Facebook and website and things like that for the community to watch at their leisure? Or are we going to be doing everything live? Because
it would be actually accommodated, be done live.
Both.
I think live is important in the sense of public comment or public accessibility. But it'll be a tape. When it's shot, then it's recorded and it's a
Great.
tape. It's kind of like, it's like our meeting here. It's live, but then it exists.
Well, I would like to be involved with that. That's one of the things I enjoy doing, as you know. Mm-hmm. So I'm there with you. I don't think there's any lack of enthusiasm from us, and we do this thing every year, so I don't see there's going to be any kind of a problem.
I think one of the interesting things that I think came out, correct me if I'm wrong, there were how many nominations? We have 12? 10, but only 2 out of the 10 were not contributing buildings, I believe. Is that right, Michael?
Yes, that's my understanding based on the Northwind surveys.
And
also one was already given the award, so would they still be involved?
Well, that building also, it's an interesting discussion. I would say yes, only because it's actually, if you look at that it's considered a non-contributing element because it's outside the period of significance, the Boulder Bowl.
Yeah.
And I think those are that's a perfect example of what we feel is historic and what we feel is important. Or it's not a beauty contest; it is very specific criteria. And I think we have to get people educated on what that period, what it means for a period of significance. What is the criteria if this kind of goes hand in hand with any kind of ordinance or any kind of thing that we're talking about. You have to be very specific about, those kind of items. And I think it would be an interesting, it's not that it's not a great part of our story, part of our history or something like that, but it tells the story of the historic district and what makes it part of the historic district, what we're trying to.
And I think too, that's educational to know the contributing and the non-contributing.
All right. And my suggestion is to, get somebody like it could be a Courtney or a Dennis McBride or some other authority that can add to that discussion, on camera rather than.
Mm-hmm.
Have we reached out to Dennis at all about this yet?
We have, but these are take real commitments to people, I mean, I think Dennis is interested in it. And there's people that, but, this is going to take a big time commitment if we structure it that way.
Why don't we try and set up some kind of a schedule as a committee, maybe to get together and either sit down or go to some of the locations that we are going to honor and use to educate the public and come up with a list of items that we want to include in the various segments for the show, because it's fast approaching. So we would probably need to be starting to get together and having sessions, let's say, on the material that we're going to have in each segment.
Right.
And then we can start filming things right away that we can film now rather than later, just knock it out, so to speak.
When is this planned for again?
October.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's the whole month, but then have we set a time when we're going to have the watch party?
I mean, those details haven't been worked out yet.
Oh, okay.
And Mr. Chairman, just as a reminder, the committee can meet separately outside of this meeting to plan this event. It doesn't require a public meeting.
Mr. Chairman, the only other thing that may be a challenge, I guess, given that as a group you only meet once a month, but as Michael just mentioned, you certainly can plan this event and get together as much as you like outside here. But for this, depending on what publicity you want from the city, such as notices in the mailer, that takes a lot of lead time. In fact, Michael, do you know if the deadlines for the utility mailers are, it used to be like almost 2 months in advance, and they weren't is it still being done monthly or not?
It is being done monthly, and it's usually about a 2 to 3 week lead time.
Susan? Sorry, you want to finish what you were saying?
Oh, no, I was just saying, obviously, if it's 2 to 3 week lead time, and if, depending on when you want to start airing these events in October, if it's early October versus mid or late, I guess, obviously, I would think you would need to kind of nail down when you think, if October is really feasible for this, because maybe you end up choosing to do it in November. I don't know, but we'll certainly be able to to give you whatever free publicity we can. We just, in some cases, we'll need, some lead time to be able to do that.
I think we should nail down some times and dates.
Well, I was just wanted to add, so in addition to the flyer, because we don't have any dates, and we're going to be doing multiple dates and times for this, but it'll be available for viewing after the fact as well, with a link. It's probably not possible to come up with a link in advance unless unless we were able to post something before the flyer goes out. If we had a link that we could include in that. But what I want to get at though is maybe this year we can try a new approach and focus heavy on the social media. The city does have a Facebook page, and they could sponsor. You can target the whole community for $2 a day here in Boulder City. You can target the whole town on Facebook. So, I mean, if there was a small budget to maybe do some advertising or sponsored posts locally through Facebook and whatnot, when we do have dates available, that's the kind of thing we can just put together real quickly.
Well, good.
I don't think it's a problem that it's sort of on the fly. I wouldn't get all like stressed about that because things have changed because of COVID. So we're just being adaptable, adaptive. So I don't see anything that's changed, Alan, except maybe your feelings, and I totally get that. But I thought you had a really great script and plan and idea, and I just think we should go for it. And if we want to meet, like, starting sometime this week or next week to kind of flesh it out, let's do it.
Well, I appreciate that from the committee. Because that's you guys are the only reason I'm still here today. So thank you. Okay, how about Friday?
I'm around.
Okay.
Anytime.
Set up something Friday. So we have Friday lunch at the hotel? How's that sound?
At 12 or 11:30?
12, noon?
Okay.
I'll make a reservation.
I'll bring a bread.
It sounds like you've got that settled. Was the committee interested in choosing the award at this meeting?
Has everybody read the Northwind report? I mean, seen the report and,
Yeah.
and seen the, sure, do you guys want to pick a winner?
I'm ready to get rid of this. We've been talking about it for so long. So,
Mr. Chairman, I can suggest or just remind the committee, this is what you've done in the past, and you're certainly welcome to change if you've got a better way you want to do it. But what you've done in the past is we would ask each of you to pick your top two, and you can use the nomination number on page 191 for reference, but also follow up with an address just so we know for sure that's the one you mean. And then, after that first go round, we can see if there's any one or, more that rises to the top. And probably what will happen is we can take, if it isn't clear by, the first vote, if need be, then I'll report back to you which two of them got the most votes, and then you can do another go round where you're just choosing among those two.
Right. Okay, so let's take some nominations then.
I'd like to nominate, my two choices are 1342 Denver Street.
Oh, that's number 8, okay.
Number 8. And the other one is the Reclamation Administration Building.
Number 10. And Ray?
And it's just top two, right?
Yeah,
Regardless of preference.
right.
Okay, so 508 to 526 Ash Street, number 2,
Number
and
2.
number 8, 1342 Denver.
Thank you. Linda Graham?
Okay, my first would be 1342 Denver, and my
And that's
second,
number 8?
number
Okay.
8, yep. My second would be 1305 Arizona Street, number 1.
Number 1, okay. Alan?
My choice is 1342 Denver.
Number
also.
8?
It's been nominated a couple times, right? She's nominated. And my second one is the Reclamation Building.
Number 10, okay. And then Blair?
number 2 and number 8.
Okay, well, basically, every single one of you had number 8 as one of your choices. So it would appear that there's not a need to do anything else, but then again, if you want, the tally is that number 8, which is 1342 Denver, got 5 votes. And then there were 2 votes for number 2, which I believe, Blair, you said number 2 and number 8, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, there were 2 votes for number 2, which was the Ash Street Apartments. There were 2 votes for number 10, which was the Bureau of Reclamation. And then there was 1 vote for number 1, which was the hotel. So there were 5 votes for number 8, 2 votes for number 2, 2 votes for number 10, and 1 vote for number 1. So if you were going to do a second vote, you actually have a tie for second place, which is the Ash Street Apartments and the Bureau. But if you wanted to go with the choice that every single one of you chose, that would be number 8, which is 1342 Denver.
How do we feel? Consensus 1342 Denver?
Works for me.
Works for me. You know, I mean, one of the reasons I've
Probably
always...
should do a motion just to.
Okay, a motion that we nominate...
That you select.
we select 1342 Denver as our Historic Preservation Award of 2020. Could have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. It is. And, you know, that makes it that special because
It's well deserved.
it's well deserved. And it's the little guy that tried, you know.
And as I mentioned in my staff report, Blair did volunteer to write up the language for the certificate, so.
Well, just to let you know, we do have permission from that landowner to be part of our program already. Also, Reclamation has volunteered, and the Ash Street Apartments, she's also very excited. She's very excited. So all the, and, you know, the nominations that everybody had mentioned, they want to be part of our virtual program. So just to let you know.
As a follow-up, typically what happens now that you've selected the award, we already have the brass plaque, but Blair will draft up the language, you know, that we'll get for the certificate. If you're wanting your event in October, do you want the city council to do the formal presentation of the award at their second meeting in September? Or are you thinking of maybe even doing that during October, depending on when you might start your online events?
You know, maybe we could, if we could, and there may be this discussion between, you know, Michael too, is like, if we're going to incorporate the North Wind report somehow, maybe we can make the presentation at that time, kind of like the finale of the event. Maybe not
At city council or during the event?
during our event, maybe
Oh.
bring the city council or the mayor or somebody to give the award at that time or something.
You mean present the award at one of your events rather than a council meeting?
That's what I was thinking maybe.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to make sure that I heard that right.
Well, it's going to be awkward at a council meeting, only in the sense that no one will be here, right?
Exactly.
Oh, good point.
Or coming.
Yeah, it should be done then during our event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could
I
do
like
it at the
it.
house, at the property, you know, I mean, you know.
Oh, great idea.
We could do it as a tour of the property.
Yeah, that'd be really neat. I think so too.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some great properties here. I mean, okay, well, that's done. That's what, we're gonna all meet. We're gonna start there. We're all go to Linda's house. Yeah, we'll just have.
So Susan, I guess you and I will figure out deadline for when you need that language by, I'm going to shoot for the beginning of October.
Well, actually, why don't, if you don't mind, if you could have it ready by the week before the September HPC meeting, then the committee can actually see the language and maybe have any input for you on that, since it sounds like now the presentation won't be until sometime in October during the event. So yeah, if you could aim to have it to me the week before, the Wednesday before your meeting in September, which is, sorry, I don't have my phone with me. It'd be the third
16th?
Wednesday.
The third Wednesday?
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
16th.
Okay. We can talk about it on Friday. We'll
Perfect,
just get it
thanks.
down.
Great.
Yeah, so there is that, Susan, as part of the packet, there is the basic schedule. We started, what page was that, Linda?
Oh, 289.
On 289 was the rough draft of how the event would go. So we can start with that conversation on Friday and kind of go from there, okay? Okay, we're done then, right? Item number 4, for possible action, update on implementation of the committee's goals and priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as we do each month, I provide an updated matrix which highlights the Historic Preservation Committee goals and provide any updates regarding that. And what I wanted to talk to the committee about tonight is next steps with respect to the Historic Preservation Plan and community outreach. As I mentioned earlier, obviously the challenges with COVID and being able to hold public meetings has put this project in hold. However, the Nevada Preservation Foundation has been looking at ways to engage the community to be able to obtain additional feedback so that they can move forward with recommendations for a draft plan that would be brought before the Historic Preservation Committee for review. And what they're proposing is that they would prepare a presentation that would be taped and would be shown on YouTube and BCTV. This presentation would provide additional information on some of the research that they've collected and provide an update on where they're at. In conjunction with that presentation, they would be asking the community to respond to a series of questions that they would develop. And to allow citizens to be able to provide input, they would have 3 ways to do that. That would be through a mail-in survey, submitting the survey online, or calling the Nevada Preservation Foundation staff and sharing that information with them verbally. And so the first step in this process would be to put in the utility mailer for September this information with dates of when they can view the presentation on YouTube and BCTV, and contact information for the Nevada Preservation Foundation so they can reach out to them to let them know their feedback survey preference, and Nevada Preservation Foundation would facilitate that. Any questions with that next step in the plan?
When would that presentation be done?
They would be working on it over the next several weeks. Ideally, they'd be shooting for the end of September to complete it, and then it would be broadcast at that time and soliciting input through the middle of October.
Is there any reason why that couldn't be part of our Historic Preservation Month? I mean, just incorporate that event as the highlight event?
I think I would keep it separate, and I would, during our event, we could, wait, it's going to be broadcast in September?
Starting in September through October. Sorry.
It seems kind of like, what I'm trying to accomplish is that education, or how do we reach out to people? How do people get involved with this?
Well, that's another thing that also should be heavily promoted in the town on the social media as well.
Right.
Because it's a social media thing too. It's going to be online. I just want to make sure that we put the effort into getting the word out on that big time, because that is a big thing for the community. We
Well, I
had a
think we
huge
have-
turnout the last time, and so we should really advertise it heavily.
How about if it's, oops, sorry.
I was going to say, items in the Boulder City paper, you know, an article about it in the Boulder City paper, or an item, would hit a few people, and maybe even the shopper.
Yeah. Well, I think my thought is that they're so close, it may confuse, people will think, okay, historic preservation, I've already done this, what's this? I mean, my thought was just like, how can we help promote that event is really was the goal. You know, how do we get, why can't we turn this event, I mean, they're almost happening at the same time. Why can't we design it so that we're promoting and outreaching that one thing, and really it's that call to action with this, with this plan what we really want people to respond and give comments and talk. That's really our goal here.
So what about if we ask them to broadcast it only starting in October when we're...
And make it part of our whole...
Well, we can, during the Preservation Day event, we can say, and don't forget to watch the presentation and bring your comments to, or, I don't know, somehow promote it like that.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Because we're going to have at least 4 times, if not more, to promote it.
Right, over and over again.
And if it's done simultaneously during October, then
I think
then you're going to get more people, I think, right? So do they have to start in September, I guess, is my question.
I can certainly check on the start point. Obviously, if it starts early and people are starting to become familiar with it, and then that leads into the Historic Preservation Day events too, that just helps to promote and reinforce the focus on historic preservation.
Really looking at I think the concept, it was Historic Preservation Month. Let's just blast it out October, with Nevada Day being the last day of October, was really more of a patriotic call than anything else.
But then maybe allow people to have a month to view the presentation.
Right. And then we talk about it during the clips and the episodes and things like that.
And we suggest that they, I guess, their questions are answered in sometime by the middle of November? Or how much time do they want people to view and then respond by either the mail-in, online, or phone call process?
Yeah, roughly a month.
A month, okay. So they would have a month, end of November, let's say, to make comments.
There's no reason why we cannot, do the live event and link it to this taped event. On every time we do this thing, we just show it again. We just, or we just do it until you're gonna catch, people. I mean, I was just looking at some of the numbers that, and if we can get community support on this, let's say, with Boulder, we're getting, like the raw viewership's getting to be about 1,000 people off of the Facebook page, but then BC Social has a watch party, they promote it, and it doubles it, and adds another 1,000 to 2,000 people. And these are all Boulder City residents. I mean, BC Social, and they're all locals, or people that are really in touch with Boulder City. But the reach in there is, and if we did that for 4 weeks with 3,000 people,
a lot of viewership.
Then we have enough.
I wonder if the Nevada Preservation Foundation might also put some resources or effort into promoting it, because I see their ads on our local Facebook all the time for tours they're conducting. Every other week they've got something that appears on the Facebook here locally. So hopefully they will promote their own workshop too to our community.
Oh, and the grassroots, and all these, the History and Art Foundation, we all have our networks and.
Is that something anybody might, from city ask them, Michael, or is that something we should reach out to them individually or about promoting the workshop to the community? If that could be
I
part.
can ask them about that.
When does the mailer actually usually arrive in people's homes? Is it like the middle of September or like September 1st?
It's in two waves, so half the community gets at the beginning of September and the other half at the middle of September.
Okay. So to me, that makes sense to the people who get it later can prepare for an October event.
Right.
So, meaning not Historic Preservation Day event, but Historic Preservation Foundation event.
It's all the city's event. It's our event,
Well,
Historic
but they're only going to be advertising the Historic Preservation Foundation's event.
Right.
So, but you could put a plug in for it's also going on during Historic Preservation Month, but just saying.
So is the Historic Preservation Day going to be in the mailer? Oh, okay. Is the Historic Preservation Day going to be in the mailer?
No, not
Or
this.
we have to determine that, I guess, Friday.
Yeah, because
Okay.
by the time you have worked out those details, we wouldn't be able to put it in the September mailer. So that's where I think Committee Member Turner's recommendation focusing on social media, and we can look at other ways to get the word out about those events. But this would be focused on encouraging viewership and participation in the feedback that the Nevada Preservation Foundation is looking for the Historic Preservation Plan.
Okay.
So I guess I wanted to provide that update to everyone that we're working to move forward with that, and Nevada Preservation Foundation would then collect all of that input and then prepare a draft plan to present to the Historic Preservation Committee for review. There's no timeline at this point. Obviously, we were hoping to have accomplished everything by June, and because of COVID, it had to be put on hold. So ideally, a couple of months after that, they would be coming before you for their presentation of the plan. Having said all of that, if there isn't any other questions with respect to Nevada Preservation Foundation outreach, I did want to highlight in the staff report that two committee members had also requested discussion under this agenda item as it relates to other action items. Member Davenport had requested discussion on pursuing a Commission of Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation grant, what they refer to as CCCHP, for the historic water filtration plant. And Member Turner had asked that there be discussion regarding objective number 4 to amend the existing codes and programs and achieve historic preservation goals and to comply with the CLG and SOI standards.
So I guess I'll just go first. This was based on, I can't remember her name, Historic Preservation. Kristen, gosh. Her recommendation for that grant program, and I went online and looked and found all kinds of really good information on what's required of that grant, and based on our current goals, strategic goals, I thought that one of the first grants, I was actually thinking of 3 grants. One would be for a treatment plan and treatment for the historic water treatment plant. The other one I thought of was perhaps a grant for rewriting our code. And then based on Courtney's recent presentation, maybe a grant for rewriting some of the properties for individual listing on the National Register. At this point, I think we could only ask for doing that for city properties. We couldn't do it for private properties, of course. But my primary or my priority would be for the historic water treatment plant. It's just this monster, huge, wonderful building. It's enjoyed by a lot of different people. It's conducive to being considered a cultural center, which is one of the criteria for getting those funds and using those funds. And I just think it would be a really great opportunity to use those funds and see how it works for a major property that is in desperate need of some stabilization. And what my suggestion was, not for rehabilitating it into a museum or some specific use, but just treating it for stabilization and repair, which would predominantly be cleaning it up, cleaning the inside out, replacing the windows, not replacing, but preserving the windows, repairing and preserving the windows, perhaps getting the bathroom up and running, and then leave it at that. And it doesn't have to have a specific primary use. It's just being stabilized for light use, let's call it, and would still be open to the public, restricted, because we can't open it up 24/7. I don't think we're prepared for that, but, and I think the community would like to see that as well as the neighborhood, so. And I was wondering if this is something that we just not only add to our current list of priorities and goals, but is there something that would help to push this along or prioritize it based on our committee's recommendation? And that is to ask the city council to go ahead and prioritize that, because I think one of the things that we have to consider that you've brought up is that this is a grant reimbursement grant. So the city has to budget for and set aside those funds for that project, for restoration or rehabilitation of a building, and then they would be reimbursed from that grant. So, so I wonder if, in lieu of just putting it on our list, we actually have to kind of push it forward with the city to start adding it to the budget as a set aside. I'm not sure how you deal with those kinds of weird budget items that are like spent but then reimbursed.
And so let me answer both questions, and let me start with the historic preservation goals. In fact, this kind of came up in my presentation last night at the city council meeting, that similar to the city strategic plan, the historic preservation goals provides a roadmap to staff and direction on how to proceed with certain objectives. And so what we've been doing over the last 8 months is showing you the progress that's being made with respect to your goals and the tentative timelines that you had developed. And that helps you to understand the progress that staff is making, and it also gives us guidance on what to focus on. Because, Member Davenport, you had mentioned that there would be budgetary considerations here, it's important that since your goals were presented to the council and approved last September, any changes that you want to recommend this evening would then be presented to the council subsequently for their approval. So that's kind of the response to the goals, that we'd be looking for direction and any changes in priorities that we could present to the city council through a vote of the committee. As it relates to the CCCHP grant, I did have an opportunity to speak to Carla Hitchcock with SHPO. She believes, though it's not set in stone by any means, because it's based on the committee's preference and budgetary considerations with the state legislature, but that the next round of grants would occur after July of 2021. So that would be the next opportunity. And again, that's not set. That's just a potential date. And in the ranking criteria for grant applications, it does encourage that there is matching monies toward the project, that the applicant is also contributing. So that goes back to the budgetary consideration. In addition to that, other criteria that are highlighted is that the project would create a cultural center. Now, when I asked for kind of a definition of a cultural center, that's kind of basically the response was a broad range of cultural uses. And that another consideration with this grant process is that the project would promote tourism in the state and will supplement training. Again, you don't have to add that, but you get extra points with that to rank it higher. So those are some other considerations. But probably one of the most important budgetary considerations for the City Council to make, which occurs within each fiscal year as part of the CIP, Capital Improvement Plan, would be budgeting funds for the design, because you need to be able to demonstrate to the state through this grant application process exactly what you want to do and how much it will cost to do that. And so those would all be considerations as part of this effort.
With those funds for design, would that be something we'd be applying for as a grant? Would that be part of the application to fund that design study, or would that be something the city would have to decide on their own? Okay, we're going to look into this. And
I'd have to double check with SHPO, but my understanding is that they're looking to fund projects and not the design. So the design would have to occur first to be able to determine the scope of the project, the cost of the project. And so then that would be a budgetary consideration.
And just from looking into it myself, it looks like that they do, they may give you money to fund parts of a project, and then you can continue to apply for the grants year after year until you complete the whole thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole project, just part of a project, right?
Yeah.
So would you do that work, Michael? The grant application process, would you be the one that would be doing all that and making sure it gets into the budget for the council?
Well, the first step in this process is getting City Council support in any updates to your goals and priorities. Then through City Council direction to staff, it would be an evaluation of modification to the capital improvement plan, which would identify capital projects and directing staff on how to proceed with those.
Play a little devil's advocate. Part of this mix is kind of the idea of matching grants, skin in the game, right? There's some matching grant aspects of this. Would it be better to partner with a nonprofit like the Art and History? You're to kind of can the city partner with a nonprofit to kind of do some of this preliminary work? Or a better way to, maybe, a nonprofit getting the design or at least the project done, and to demonstrate community interest in this project.
I guess after getting guidance from the City Council in terms of priorities and direction, that's certainly something that the City Council could consider.
So, Michael, are you suggesting that this is perhaps a separate goal as far as seeking a grant for the water treatment plant, or that it falls under perhaps goal number 8 for identifying buildings to repurpose and reuse as appropriate?
Well, I guess in terms of, while we had the broad range from that goal, I think it would be helpful to be able to get City Council input, because obviously your recommendation that this is a higher priority would need to be communicated to the council so that they could factor it into any budgetary considerations.
I'm suggesting that it's already in a priority number 8, or it's a goal number 8, but does it need to be prioritized amongst all these other goals?
Well, we have ranges, and at least from staff directive, what we've been looking at is those objectives that have the shorter timelines. So for example, number 1, because the timeline was between July of 19 and October of 19, we knew that was first and foremost the priority to work with the committee and get to the council, which was accomplished. And so you see that with your goals, some of the later goals have a broader time frame. And so at least from the staff directive, we've been focused on the earlier ones. But certainly, I think for the committee to communicate any changes or emphasis and priority, even if you could incorporate it into number 8, then that can be presented to the council for consideration.
It's number 8 is such a broad, it's within such a broad span of time, and I think because you just mentioned that the grant isn't, we can't apply for that grant until July of 2021.
Correct.
So, but I still don't know what the CIP schedule is. So what's, I guess, the deadline for getting this in the CIP?
The Public Works Department is beginning that process with the City Council as we speak. There'll be a workshop, the initial workshop, occurring over the next month and a half. When a city completes a fiscal year budget, usually you're starting on the next one almost immediately. And so I would suggest that if you want to emphasize this item to the council, providing direction on that tonight so that can be communicated to the City Council.
I guess I make a motion to recommend to City Council to, for, I guess, city staff to pursue grant, well, first to pursue adding this project in the CIP for the purpose of getting us within the grant, the historic preservation grant cycle. And this would be for the historic water treatment plant.
I'll second it.
Any more discussion? I'm just kind of, how would that affect staff? Is that, I mean, in your point of view?
We would present to the council. It's up to the council to decide as they're evaluating the capital improvement plan, what types of projects the city should prioritize.
My only comments, I have a little reluctance. I mean, not that the water treatment plant isn't important, but is that the most important thing that, you know, is that an individual building? Is that what the committee feels that is that important rather than other bigger goals?
Yeah, we've been working on that for several years, so I think it is.
Okay.
I think it's one of a number of priorities. However, it's for the purpose of our current CIP schedule and the schedule of the Historic Preservation Grant. It's a project that's kind of ready to go.
Right.
And unless somebody else can come up with another project deserving of this grant money to go ahead and put into the cycle within the next, I mean, because they're meeting now on the CIP.
Right.
So that's what the only other, like I said, the only other one I could think of would be a grant for rewriting the code.
Right.
So, I mean, we're a committee, we can.
Right.
talk about that too.
I would rather do the water treatment plant than code myself.
Bet you would.
Okay, we'll take it to a vote.
You have a motion and a second, so.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Is there any more discussion on this agenda item? Your second item?
Ray, your second item?
Or, I'm sorry, Ray.
Yes, so I had requested that we have some discussion. I would like to propose that we, as a committee, make a recommendation to the council to direct this committee, assisted by staff, to update and identify the needed changes to our historic preservation code. And I would also like to ask the council to commit to having 2 council members, if possible, join us in that effort in a non-voting capacity, to be present and to be involved with discussion and part of discussion on changes that we may feel we would like to see happen with regard to the code. So we've just had the survey. It's just a coincidence that we got the draft report, but now is the time. They do recommend that we have a enforceable code, and I think it's a very, very urgent matter that we as a committee should be, leading the charge, so to speak, on. So, that's what I wanted to ask you guys, how you feel about that. If you think it's a good idea to ask the council to direct us to take on this task officially and demonstrate to the community that we're serious about historic preservation in Boulder City, and it's a much needed and noble endeavor, in my opinion. So I wanted to see if you as a committee would support sending that message to council.
I support that.
I second that.
Isn't that what we're doing with the Nevada Foundation? Is
No.
exploring an ordinance change?
Well, I guess you have concurrently public outreach effort on what should be the priorities of the community with respect to historic preservation going on right now. So you'd be asking to make this a priority prior to that public input?
Yes, I would be. And there's no reason for that the Nevada Preservation Foundation's conclusions and ideas can't be considered as we proceed. I don't expect this is something that's going to happen within the next couple of months. What I'm proposing, actually, and I didn't mention it, was that we set aside as a committee at least 90 minutes per month in a scheduled meeting to work on this one issue, and not be having it something that's coming up once a month. I think that even monthly, if we were to have such a meeting and we have 2 council members involved and staff, and it'll probably take us many months just at that. So the Nevada Preservation Foundation's conclusions will already be evident and discussed and part of any discussion that we are having. And then, we are the people who are put here to oversee our historic preservation efforts in town. And so there's no better people to have that discussion than us and present it to the council, which is presenting it to the people. It would be open. The public would be making their voice heard through the Nevada Preservation Foundation. They've made their voice heard through surveys we've conducted in the past, and we've all been around, except for you, Linda, but I know you were watching, I'm sure. So we have a lot to go on already. So I think now is the time, and, you know, I want to strike while the iron is hot.
So I'm not clear, Ray, it would be part of our meeting, the 90-minute workshop?
A separate meeting.
Oh, it would be a separate meeting?
Separate,
Okay.
scheduled meeting.
So, okay, so it's like a committee or ad hoc?
Exactly.
Okay. And you want two members?
We are the committee, so
Yeah,
it wouldn't be
two
ad hoc,
members
it would
and
be
then
official.
staff, right?
I would like to invite 2 members of council. I think it's important that the
Oh, 2 members of the council.
two members of
Okay.
council. I
Okay.
don't know if, I think recently the council, there was something going on with the pool committee, was there? Were there some council members, Michael, involved in discussions and meetings with the pool committee, or how did that
Our
work?
ad hoc committee.
It was an ad hoc
Was it an
committee
ad hoc
created
committee?
by the
Oh.
city council.
Okay. Okay, well, maybe that's what we need to have. But I want to put it to council anyway, you know, that we, as a committee, I feel that we're up to the challenge. And we just had the report come out, so we have a lot of great information at our disposal and a lot of things to educate ourselves on and look and see where our priorities should be. So I think all of that should all work together with the effort to fix our code, you know.
Do you need a motion? Or do you want to make a
Well,
motion?
of course, how do you guys feel about this? I mean, I'd like to, you know, discussion. That's all I asked for was discussion. And, you know, this is what I would like to ask you guys to do. And if you want to, great. But, you know, let's discuss it.
Yeah. I think it's a little cart before the horse. I mean, I think what the Nevada Foundation is kind of like the next step to me, a logical step, and hear what the people say. You know, I think if we do an ordinance right now, especially if we just get the city council, I mean, I think it'd be limited amount of public input. You know, I mean, I think we should listen to the public first and then get into the committee. That's my thought.
I disagree.
I think you might not have heard what I just said, Michael. Sorry, Michael. Alan. No, what I proposed was that we have monthly meetings with council to discuss this, not do it right now. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. I say it again, you know, I think it's going to be a many months procedure, and the Nevada Preservation Foundation's efforts and the results of the job that they were hired to help us with will also be a part of that. That's all going to be coming out simultaneously, which to me seems like a very natural course of events. We're not putting the cart before the horse. We're taking some action that's much needed in the community. And in fact, many people that showed up for the workshop that the Nevada Preservation Foundation put on for us earlier this year or last year was they wanted to see a code with teeth. And now we've just had a study, the results of a study come in that recommends, they didn't say it word for word like that, but they said an enforceable code is needed in Boulder City. And it has to start somewhere, and this is where it should start, is with this committee. And we've been talking about this for years already, so this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
So basically then you want to have an ad hoc committee formed, but it would be approved by the city council, is that what that is?
Yes,
Okay.
sanctioned.
So,
The point of order, I guess my understanding is when you say ad hoc committee, that's usually something else. I mean, I assume what Ray is proposing is this committee. I mean, because who
Well,
else
we
would
already
be
are.
working on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess I would need clarification from the council. If you're going to be appointing members of the council, that would be an ad hoc committee that would be directed by the city council. You just can't have the city council members just show up and be a part of your discussion here. That would be something that they would form.
So I think the question is, or what you're looking at is, we want to remain the Historic Preservation Committee, but when it comes to topics regarding the task of updating the code, we would like 2 council members to be a part of that discussion. And therefore, does that make us then an ad hoc committee just for that? Or do we just ask this 2 city council members, or 1 or 2, to be ad hoc members of this committee? And they would have, so there's no ad hoc committee, they're just ad hoc members.
Yeah, and well, I guess first and foremost, it's changing the committee goals that I need to take to the council, and I can certainly share with them your preferences and get city council direction on how to proceed with that.
It's goal number 4. So there's no change. It's just we're within the year of, setting this up.
Right, but you're wanting to formally request a council member or a second 2 council members be participating in this discussion. And so
in order to meet goal number 4.
Right. So that's what I would take to them to ask. And it would be in the context of these goals.
Right. So there's no need to update this goal. It's just a matter of taking this goal and pushing it, or, reorganizing it to prioritize it with the addition of 2 ad hoc council members, or up to 2 ad hoc council members, if that's feasible. Is that what you're suggesting? That's how I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me just say, it's not the horse before the cart. I mean, it's not the cart before the horse. It's going to take a while, I think, to stand up this kind of process and figure out, like, what are we going to do? And so with the code, right, what's the process of not only updating the code, but getting public feedback? Part of that public feedback includes the Historic Preservation Foundation's work, as well as previous work and ongoing work, because you don't update a code in a matter of a month. It's going to take a while. So I'm looking forward to that public comment period, as well as the commitment, hopefully, from City Council, direct participation from City Council or members of City Council.
So, Michael, do we need to make a motion or anything, or you're just going to talk to the council about it?
I would prefer a motion that is your formal request to them.
Okay.
Similar to the request for the 2 awards, so that I can take that to the council and get feedback.
Okay.
Did anybody else want to add anything? Or well, in that case, I'd like to make a motion that we as a committee make a proposal to the City Council to direct this committee, or to direct this committee, assisted by staff and 2 council members, to start discussion on updating and identifying changes to our Historic Preservation Code, Chapter 1127, Historic Resources.
Specifically, though, for a separate meeting each month.
And I ask that we have a separate meeting once a month for approximately 90 minutes to work on this.
I'll second it.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, for possible action, discussion regarding possible change of meeting time. Which meeting?
Well, let's start, we don't know, we'll have to find out first what the council response is. It will obviously involve a lot of extra time for everybody for a second meeting, but let's just deal with this meeting. Is the committee interested in meeting at an earlier time, as most of the other committees do?
Yes.
Would somebody care to make a motion? Or obviously there's needs to be discussion.
Let's just discuss what time would you guys like the meeting?
Well, it depends on work conflicts. I don't know about anybody else's. Any time is fine for me.
I prefer any time after 5.
I like 7 myself, but
I can't stand 7.
I can't hardly stay awake this long, or
I need a suggestion for a meeting time.
I suggest we meet at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock?
I think that's a good time.
In discussion, how does staff feel about that?
That's workable for staff?
Workable for staff? Okay, can I have a motion?
Who made the motion? Yeah, somebody.
I make a motion to change our meetings to start at 5 p.m.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unopposed.
Sorry, was that none opposed or
None
one?
opposed, that's
None?
okay. I'm going to
Okay.
go with whatever the committee wants to do.
Okay, in that case,
I like unanimous decisions, you know.
sorry, I think we've got two on the mics that gives feedback. So, okay, starting next month then, we'll start at 5 p.m. And then also, actually, that'll be a convenient time because next, a couple of members, your terms technically end at the end of this month, so council will do reappointments sometime next month, but September is traditionally, technically your first meeting of a new year because your memberships all expire August 31st, so you'll be electing new officers next month.
And so which members' terms are expiring?
I think it's member Turner and member Graham. But the clerk's office will be in touch with you to find out if you want to be reappointed. August 31st.
That's nice nowadays.
Okay, is there any other discussion, update on status of properties in the historic district? I mean, just that they broke ground, I mean, they just started construction over at the Router building. Kind of exciting. And also, I'm very excited about the memo you sent us about the Nevada, the Commission on Women, that seminar that's coming up in September. And they're looking for nominations. And I can think of a particular woman that would be great for this city, kind of go in conjunction with that. Perfect place to get Ida Browder's name up there. Okay. Any other discussions of historic properties in the district, number 6? Okay.
I actually have a question about the fence.
Oh, the fence.
Was a note, or were the owners contacted? Or any update on that?
Yes, so the fence, and Susan, I think you put this in the report under, it's on Ash Street.
Oh, yeah.
You recall the number?
418.
Oh, thank you, 418. So in response to the inquiry, staff investigated fences under 4 feet in height do not require a building permit. But columns do. And so in the case of this construction, the columns required a building permit. The building official did contact the owners to inform them that they needed to submit a building permit for the columns. As it relates to fences in front yards, with the historical guidelines, it doesn't speak to fences. And so that would not, even if it did require a permit for the full fence, that would have not triggered review by the Historic Preservation Committee because it's not one of the elements that is reviewed by the committee with respect to improvements to properties in that area.
So one of the questions I have, I guess, in the ad hoc committee meetings that Ray is suggesting, I mean, these are the kind of things we could, about revising guidelines and talking about, I mean, those are the kind of things we would be discussing within that committee, I would assume. Are there additions to the guidelines that aren't in there now that we can bring up?
Actually, just to clarify, because of how it works, what the ordinance says is it gives the committee the power to create or draft guidelines, which then go to the city council for approval. All of the guidelines in the past were simply created by former Historic Preservation Committee members in discussion at your regular meetings. And so then once the committee drafted guidelines, they went to council for approval. So you wouldn't be putting guidelines in the ordinance. The ordinance already allows you to create those guidelines. As I understand Mr. Turner's proposal, the purpose of the meeting would be to determine how the code should be amended. And I believe traditionally, in other communities where they do have regulatory standards, your guidelines, so to speak, are still not part of your code. Your code would specify whether or not compliance with the guidelines is mandatory or voluntary, or how that would be addressed. But the guidelines themselves, I mean, you can, if you want the guidelines, amended, you can do that now. I mean, you can start proposing whatever guidelines you want, but as I said, staff did not create those. Staff had no input in those. It's strictly committee driven. If the committee wants to regulate fences, you can propose guidelines that will regulate fences, and then that will go to city council.
Good, thank you, Susan.
So I guess it's an interpretation. I wonder if it's an interpretation thing too, because the code 11-27-5B5 application of guidelines does state that any fences, walls, and major landscaping elements within a historic area or district ... It may not be specific, but
Can be incorporated in the guidelines.
Right. It's just that the guidelines that the previous committee members created, fences are not mentioned anywhere because the committee based all the previous guidelines on what's in the nomination to the National Register of Historic Places, which doesn't address fences. If the committee wants to go beyond that, and they have before, because, for instance, the nomination to the National Register never mentioned sheds and accessory buildings, but prior committee members wanted standards for sheds and accessory buildings, so the committee created guidelines for those, which did get adopted by council. So yes, if the committee wants to address fences or anything else, you are welcome to create either separate guidelines for that or amend all the existing guidelines for that. It's just depends on what you want to do, but you can do that. But city staff are not allowed to, delay any permits based on our assumption of what you may or may not care about. We have to go by the guidelines as they've been adopted. And that's the only thing that we can legally delay a permit based on.
so if we were to update the guidelines to include fences, especially in the tree streets, would then city also update their code? So for instance, if we said any and all fences, no matter how high or low they are, you would then go back to your fence guides that were done in 2016 and eliminate that or clarify that the 4-foot fence rule does not apply to these particular historic properties. So we're not just updating our guidelines, but also the other guidelines that exist or that pertain to fencing in general for the entire city.
We would need to look into that a little further because the premise of all the previous adopted guidelines is that they do not apply to items which don't require a permit. So we couldn't, that'd be a little trickier to deal with.
Yeah, because that's regulating something that doesn't need permission from the city to begin with. So that's the challenge. So I guess that would require a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to now require that all fences receive permits throughout the city.
Or can you just say permits for properties outside of the historic district? Or, I mean, does it have to be so all-encompassing?
Well, it's a tricky matter because it's the building code that doesn't require a permit for fences under 4 feet, but we'd have to examine the ways in order to make that happen.
Well, just as guidelines are street to street, I mean, it changes from street to street, our guidelines right now are different depending on where the houses are located. Can the ordinances or zoning laws pertain certain streets rather than, we just say,
You, Mr. Chairman, you could rezone certain blocks, like with a overlay district, that have additional guidelines. You could do that.
Right.
What that requires is going through a rezoning process and notification of the property owners and consideration by the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Right. In the seminar in Tacoma, that's one of the strategies that they kind of it's overlays, zoning overlays as a specific answer to historic districts, because like our house, not all parts of the historic districts are equal, so to speak.
And isn't there kind of an overlay for some of the historic district, like the business district, or is that not an official overlay? That's just a address designation, or does the city have any overlays, I guess?
There is
within the historic district area.
The historic district is shown on the zoning map because there is a zoning chapter for historic resources. And in that zoning chapter, it allows guidelines to be adopted, and it allows the city to delay the issuance of permits if it's not in conformance with the guidelines. So because there is a zoning ordinance for the historic district, which allows some restriction, that being a delay, not a denial, of a building permit, that's why the district boundaries are shown on the zoning map.
But isn't there maybe I'm thinking of the signage code, or the code for signage, and there's a distinction between signs located here versus the signs located along Hotel Road, and what can and can't occur on those.
Right, and
is that considered an overlay or just zone?
No,
or a part within the zone?
It's a part within the zone. The sign chapter has basically 4 different sign districts, and the maps for those are in that chapter.
Got it.
Just in the discussion, just talking about zoning, and is in this committee that raised this ad hoc committee we're talking about with the ordinance, would it be, we're talking about having a couple city council, would it be appropriate from the planning commission be part of this discussion?
Well, I guess, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to run too far afield of this agenda item. This is kind of doing updates on activities that are occurring within the district.
I'm sorry. Okay.
And I also wanted to note, in response to Member Davenport's inquiry, you also saw the memo from our building official, Mark Palm, responded to your inquiries about how the building code and how Nevada state statute affect historic preservation and the preservation of buildings within Nevada.
So I wanted to elaborate on that. Thank you. I thank him for providing that information, but I would want to add for the record, under his last paragraph regarding NRS and Historic Building Code, there are 2 other building codes that do address construction. It doesn't necessarily regulate construction. However, it does address, or it promotes historic preservation within the context of construction, rehabilitation, and that kind of thing. And that's NRS 278.50. Under zoning districts and regulations, just basically within the zoning district can regulate and restrict the erection, construction, reconstruction, alteration, repair, or use of buildings and structures or land. And then when you go to M, that would be for the purpose of ensuring the protection of existing neighborhoods and communities, including the protection of historic neighborhoods. So again, he's correct in that it's not setting rules for constructions or exemptions for repairs, but it is at least promoting preservation and does address construction, reconstruction, which of course then gets into the building code. And then the other one is 278.02076, and that's the authority of governing body to designate historic neighborhoods and requirements and procedures for designation of area as historic neighborhood. And under number 4, an ordinance under which a historic neighborhood is designated must, without limitation, contain criteria which substantially achieve the preservation and protection of sites, buildings, and structures. And it basically designates a review board with the power to review proposed alterations to buildings and structures. So I'm just pointing that out, that it is related to his comment in that there's more than just 278.570 that addresses what he was talking about. That's all.
Yeah, and I guess I wanted to emphasize that what the memo highlights is that with the recent City Council adoption of the 2018 I-codes, it provides greater opportunities to encourage the preservation of historic preservation properties.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, is there anything else on this agenda item? 6. If not, let's go. Number 7, for possible action, committee discussion regarding potential agenda items for the upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings. We need more?
Well, and Mr. Chairman, I just want to reemphasize, this is a great opportunity at this meeting to give staff enough time to be able to respond to requests to add agenda items to the next meeting, and certainly we will try to accommodate when we get the last minute requests, but the sooner you can get it to us, the better, so that we can do any research that's needed or prepare material for committee consideration.
I don't know if this comes under the heading of needing to be on the agenda for next meeting, but I have an idea to promote the historical nature of the town through a weekly column in the newspaper called 70 years ago this week, 20 years ago this week, 30 years ago this week. And I've been working on some of the items, and I have enough to hand out to all of you of one that I worked up to give you an example to see how you feel about it. And also I've been working with 2 of the very helpful ladies at the library who have been doing microfiche for me and have come up with dozens of articles and ideas over the last 80 years. But I thought it would be a good way to get it out there about, hey, this happened, and wow, I remember this, and you know, I knew that person, and oh, wow. In the paper that was very popular, my hometown newspaper had a column like that, and that's the first thing everybody turned to, was what happened 40 years ago this week.
So what we could do is add that to next month's agenda, and you could describe it.
Okay, distribute them then?
Distribute them then.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there any other potential agenda items from the committee?
Few things that came up tonight. So how about some more discussion on the updating that 1991 survey of Boulder City water supply system? And also possibly nominate, if we nominate the water filtration plant and the water tank on the hill to be listed on the National Register, Michael, that's not considered updating our register, is it? That would be a separate thing. Yeah. So I've lumped those 2 things together maybe in an agenda item, or should they both have separate?
I want to piggyback on one of those would be, I'm curious about what the Boulder City history or historic register is, what that looks like, and where does it live, and how, and does the city have a form, I guess,
The
for?
historic registry?
Yes.
That's just simply a listing of all the addresses in the district.
Does the city have a form for people to nominate properties to the local registry?
No, because right now, everything in the district is is on the National Register of Historic
Right,
Places.
but we could still nominate individual buildings as, or, I mean, what is the designation, significant historic I mean, there's different designations we could bestow on historic properties. Let's say the water tank or the filter. I mean, I think it's one of the things that we should be doing. Start with the easy ones, city-owned buildings. Nothing has individually, like when she talks about in the report that this property is eligible for individual nomination. I think that's one of the other layers that we should be looking at. That's kind of low-hanging fruit for us, I think. Mm-hmm. Let's at least get the city buildings, and then you can attach. Then, you know, when you talk about, let's say, a new ordinance or something like that, once we talk about those designations, those buildings, let's say, that are, you know, especially the ones that are contributing, can have a special status in the ordinance.
I'm a little confused.
So actually, yeah, what I was asking about was how does one go about nominating properties to the local register? The last one I think that we looked at sort of kind of was a nomination, quote unquote, was for the airport hangar. Was that sufficient? Was that okay? Did you need?
I was trying to get a district created, historic district.
But it was, so when you nominate something to the National Register or even to the state register, there's a form you fill out that describes why and how. Does the city have something like that? Should the city? That was why I was wondering, is this a discussion for next week where we need to set up standards
I guess
for a local register?
A local, which I think is the strongest, from what they're saying, is as strong as the designation, is stronger than the national designation, because we can attach whatever, our local designation, we can attach whatever we want to those local designations.
Right, but we don't really have a local register, except we've just taken the National Register and dumped it into what we call a local register.
Right, we say everybody is part of it.
Mr. Chairman, how about this for the committee's edification? The agenda item is the topic of the local register, which provides background and process and how that has been created in the past.
And how to move forward.
Right.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Are there any other agenda items? Now you guys realize that, you know, you're going to be spending, you know, a good part of your life here.
Yeah, and staff's gonna need.
Staff is getting, their eyes are rolling.
We may need more staff.
We need more staff. Historic planner? No? Okay, yeah, we try. Okay, if there's no other agenda items, shall we open up for the last public comment? And public comment at this time can be open to anything. It doesn't have to be on the agenda. If you've waited this long, you can speak now. So the number is 702-589-9629. 702-589-9629. Once again, it's time for public comment, 702. It's number 589-9629. Thank you. Was that message just for me, Holly? Okay, barring any public comment, anything coming in, Michael? Okay, let's adjourn this meeting.